Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:06 on the first day of August. Holy Moses, this year is flying by before our eyes, but we are buckled up and riding this roller coaster and holding on for dear life, and I hope you're right there with us. Thanks for joining us on O'Connor and Company. This is America's Morning Show. Coming up at 6:35, Tiffany Polifko, former member of the Loudoun County School Board, talk about how that system is contemplating unionizing the teachers, and this is something that has a domino effect and will have ramifications all across school systems in this country, and it's something that they're grappling with just like your community is grappling with. So we'll talk about it. It's 7:05. Harrison Fields, somebody from the Trump campaign, to talk about that Black Journalist Convention yesterday. 7:15. Rob O'Donnell, New York police officer who was there at Ground Zero on September 11th, friend of this program, will get his reaction to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed getting a plea deal from Joe Biden. 7:35 brings us the sheriff of Loudoun County, Mike Chapman, on that grandmother who was killed by an illegal alien in a carjacking. And then at 8:05, our friend KT McFarland. That's a lot to get to. And I'm glad I've got our friend, and frankly, my favorite member of the National Association of Black Journalists, Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks. I didn't even know I was a member. And it's 5:08
right.
now.
I just realized you're not allowed to be in that group. It's a segregated, exclusionary group.
But can I identify with however or whoever I want to identify
well,
as?
Well, that seems to be what Kamala Harris. Can we? Where do we begin on this?
World?
You worked for the Trump campaign in 2020. You worked for the Trump White House during 2017 to 2019. I want to say. You know better than I do.
Goodness, what a memory! Are you?
Is that correct? Did I nail that?
I'm looking for a job.
You know, I always track your CV, Mercedes. I just remember those 2 years when it was
and Larry's friend
to reach
for
you.
like 20 years. Huh?
Yes, but when she worked for the Trump White House, you text her and good luck getting a response.
That's not true. I was so good.
It was a busy time.
The thing is,
in your
remember,
life,
they all track your text, so you have to be careful what you text.
So if you wake up this morning and you're with the Trump campaign, as you were 4 years ago, do you think that you have advanced your cause here with the American voter, especially those small handful of undecided voters? And I'm always told it's the white suburban moms you got to worry about. I'm not so sure that's the case. But that being said, if you wake up this morning with the Trump campaign and you look at yesterday's events and the reaction of President Trump's appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists, are you high-fiving each other today or are you wringing your hands today?
Look, I think you're dealing with having to respond to what would be predictable calls coming from the left-wing media. I think that's really what is happening right now at the White House. That's why you've seen every single headline being like, oh, he's attacking her, Kamala Harris's racial identity. And quite frankly, we have to understand what this race is about. It's about Kamala wants this race to be about white man with orange hair versus black woman.
Right.
Okay,
right.
that's what she wants
begun
the race
this whole
to be
racial
about.
divide.
Yeah, so that's why she has
Yeah.
white dudes for Harris, and then she has Karens for Harris. I mean, she has drag queens for Harris. She doesn't have Larry for Harris. You could have fit the white dude one, but it's purely like insane how they want to put us into these racial buckets and divide us. Talk about division. That's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. With that being said, the president, I think, going to the National Association of Black Journalists, I'm so glad he went. She doesn't show up. He is unafraid. He will go and speak to anyone. Now, knowing that they're going to treat him unfairly, knowing that whatever he says, his comments will be cut up. Now, as his comms person, of course it creates a headache for the campaign, because you're really having to deal with these unnecessary news cycles that don't even explain the president really and how he is. He's more focused. If this race can be on policy, Donald Trump wins. If this race becomes about black versus white and the division of America, then it's Kamala.
Well, that's interesting. And if that's the case, then some people will say, then why is he going into the National Association of Black Journalists? I think it was actually, and I don't know why, because I look at people that I have great respect for, who I think are intelligent, who are saying, oh, God, he probably shouldn't have done that, and this is that.
No, I don't agree with that.
I've heard those people wringing their hands and renting their clothing since late 2015 about, okay, that's it, Trump's finished, Trump's over, no, and they've always miscalculated on that. Let's bring people up to speed if they don't know, because I think from the very beginning of this engagement at the National Association of Black Journalists, which, by the way, started over half an hour late, which is, incredibly disrespectful to the candidate, because he's on a tight schedule. He has to get to a rally later that evening, which he did go to. We'll play audio from that a little later in the program. Listen to Rachel Scott of ABC set this up. This is the very beginning of the encounter. This is how they decided to start this open interview. Cut one, please.
Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and I say this, historically, black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that.
So now people see that exchange, Mercedes, and they think, oh, my gosh, look at Trump. He's being so – I mean, that was the most horrendous intro that I've ever seen. In fact –
Yeah.
I wanted you to react because we have to break for traffic, but really quickly, that introduction of Donald Trump at the National Association of Black Journalists reminded me immediately of this.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't. Your Twitter account...
Now, that exchange right there, that didn't end well for Megyn Kelly, if you remember. I mean, she's sort of rehabbed herself now, and she's come back as an independent journalist.
Now she comes to CPAC. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and listen, Megyn, but that Megyn Kelly at that moment thinking that was going to be some kind of rhetorical kill shot that ended the Trump campaign in 2015, the crowd reaction tells you everything. It launched him actually further and helped him, and I think that's what happened yesterday, too. We're going to get more details in a moment. First, though, it's 5:15 WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
National Association of Black Journalists, there was a panel of 3 women. Harris Faulkner was one of them. She didn't engage in that sort of thing. She actually asked questions to try to get information from the candidate who was sitting there. Instead, the other 2 journalists seemed like their job was to fight and win a debate with Donald Trump. They were being celebrated either as champions for ending Trump's campaign, which I think is just a hilarious take, or they were being held up as some kind of victims of Trump racist aggression. It is a fascinating thing to see unfold, especially since we know Donald Trump. We've seen this sort of thing before. And ultimately, when a journalist puts the veil down and they reveal themselves the way that reporter did, Mercedes, I think Trump wins. And he's got to win for walking into that lion's den, knowing that he was going to get that. It was the friendliest of all environments in the world for Kamala Harris, and she didn't bother to show up.
She didn't even. I think it's so bizarre she doesn't show up. Like, I was like, why wouldn't you show up to where she will be treated very well compared to Donald Trump? Obviously, the Democrats are having problems with the black vote. We've seen more and more black, especially black men, supporting Donald Trump, but she doesn't show up, and she has not had an interview, a press conference, nothing, since she's been coronated the queen of the Democrat Party.
And it's funny. The first thing you raised was the one point where let's listen to it. It's cut. I think it's cut 3 here. Yeah, listen to cut 3 because this is what everyone was pulling on, that he's challenging the racial identity of Kamala Harris. Here, listen.
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir,
of
I'm
that.
asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So, I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly, very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be
clear,
clear,
let me tell you something. And again, as a white man, I know I'm not allowed to comment on these things, but I can tell you what I observed.
Yes, you can. It's America. You can comment. You really can.
I'm being sarcastic, but I do
good.
observe what people say. It's part of my job to see what the conversations are like out there on social media and other circles. Can I tell you something? There is a not insignificant part of the black voting base who are very suspicious of Kamala Harris, and as far as they are concerned, she is not authentically black. And the fact that there are headlines from when she won her Senate race as the first Indian American to ever serve in this or that or that, he's not wrong. And it may sound discordant to the elite ears of Manhattan and Washington, D.C. to hear Trump be as frank and plain-spoken as he is, which you should be used to by now. But the fact is that, I believe, resonates with a lot of voters in the black community who do not trust this woman.
Yeah, look, I think his answer was so Donald Trump, which is I could just picture him, that they were walking him through, and he's like, well, wait a second. She's always identified as an Indian. It was never an insult. It was not. It's just not how he is. It wasn't an insult the way he talked about it. But they turn it into this is a horrible insult against Kamala Harris, and then she takes advantage and saying, oh, this is so divisive, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, come on, Larry. It's so predictable what was happening. And again, you see Rachel Scott be incredibly disrespectful to Donald Trump, asking making it, she's trying to just be so mean, and so rude. And it's like, you can't take these people seriously. And he's there. He's like, look, I'll answer your questions. But it was always going to be about identity and the blackness and dividing. And dividing. Well, that was the whole purpose of this whole thing.
Biden himself singled out Kamala Harris as an example of his commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah,
and by the way, if you love DEI, why is that an insult? All right.
Yeah.
But here, this may shock you, but guess who's not pleased about what happened yesterday?
Who?
Joy Reid. But wait. No.
Okay.
She's actually angry at the National Association of Black Journalists.
Why?
Wait, listen.
I also just want to say one quick thing about this invitation to the president and board of NABJ. Y'all got played. Donald Trump showed up at the convention for exactly 3 reasons. 1, to try to dispel the notion that he's scared to debate a black woman, a presumption one can draw from his refusal to commit to debating VP Harris, who, again, for those in the back, is a black and Asian woman. It's also why he lost it like a grumbly senior at the retirement home who didn't get his Jell-O dessert when ABC's Rachel Scott challenged him to answer basic questions. And how likely is it that he would have shown up at all if the lady from the network that paid a $787 million legal settlement for spreading the big lie wasn't included on the panel? Second, to steal the attention.
By the way, that's so insulting to Harris Faulkner, who is a consummate professional. But this is typical.
Wait, she went after Harris Faulkner. I didn't realize
if you're not
that.
a black woman who agrees with Joy Reid, you're the enemy, and you're the othering.
How gross
She
is that?
won't even name her. It's but hold on, there's
just...
more because listen, she's really angry. She thinks that Trump won this exchange and got something out.
That Vice President Kamala Harris has hijacked from him because she's just more interesting and her support is more joyous and rooted in popular American culture. And 3, to create clips to play for his very white, very right-wing MAGA fan base of him standing up to the blacks. Joining me now is April Ryan.
Yeah, April Ryan, by the way, also unhappy with the invitation. So she's upset. She thinks NABJ got played, and she's angry that the invitation was even extended. Again, that helps Trump, too.
It 100% helps Trump. I do think, first of all, Joy Reid's comments about, he being in a senior citizen who didn't get his Jell-O. I mean, talk about ageism.
Please.
For crying out loud, she's going after the senior citizens. What the heck is that about?
Right.
And she gets away with it.
Seniors were great when Joe Biden was the candidate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So look, I think let there be infighting between the, NABJ and Joy Reid. That sounds like a lot of joy there. But the reality is that I say this: if President Trump can stay on policy, President Trump wins this debate. Wins the election. If it ends up becoming this battle of identity, Kamala Harris will take advantage of it because she cannot speak on. There is no accomplishments there. It's just a record of failures coming out.
Let me end this. Listen, we're going to talk about this more all morning long. It is a dominant conversation, and that's also a win for Donald Trump when the conversation is centered around him. I think that helps. At 7:05, Harrison Fields joins us from the Trump campaign to talk about this. But I'll leave you with this observation. If you're right about that, and I think you are right, if it's about policy, Kamala doesn't have a chance. That's why she's making this race about identity politics. Then that's what people think was the misstep for Trump here, because he walked into this lion's den that was obviously going to be about racial politics, and he drew more fire questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris. So didn't he actually open up even further scrutiny about identity politics, which plays into Kamala Harris's hand? That's the debate happening today in America, and we kicked it off for you.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36 here on O'Connor and Company, where no one here is backing down from any challenge this important election year. It's the first day of August, and we got you covered. At 6:35, Tiffany Polifko, former member of the Loudoun County School Board, gives her opinion about the move to unionize the teachers there. 7:05, Harrison Fields with the Trump campaign on yesterday's scene at the Black Journalist Convention. 7:15, Rob O'Donnell on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's plea deal. 7:35, Loudoun County Sheriff Mike Chapman on the latest violent crime at the hands of an illegal alien. And then at 8:05, KT McFarland will join us about the escalation in the war against terrorism being waged by our friends, our allies, the State of Israel. I'm Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlapp, of all people. Look at you, Mercedes.
Hi. What's going on?
You've been doing double duty because our friend Chris Plant, of course, is on his listener cruise, and so you've been filling in his anchor chair there at his Right Squad show on Newsmax.
And I dragged you in on Monday. I was
You
like,
did.
I had a special request. I was like, please, I would like Larry O'Connor to be on the show. So
it
he
was a
can carry
party.
most of the show.
I
It
love
was
that
a
I
party.
finally get to do Chris Plant's show when Chris Plant is gone. That's fantastic.
Well, that's the whole key was to hijack Chris Plant's show, but don't tell him.
This is how I got started. 12 years in July of 2012. Chris went on his listener cruise, and I sat in for him on the Chris
Is that
Plant
how
show.
it worked?
That was the first time WMAL ever heard me.
Oh wow!
And then
He's a king. He's a kingmaker.
He really
so there
is.
you go.
Yeah,
No, we
exactly.
miss Chris.
When I started the job, and I went over and I talked to him, and I said, "Hey, yeah, I've been filling in for you." And he goes, "Really? Yeah, I have no idea." And it's not really
Look,
involved.
the one thing about Chris is that he lives the best life ever. Like, he's on the cruise. He's going, he's in Scotland and Ireland. And I'm like, gosh, I'm working a lot.
He may be listening now because I just got a text from him. He is at the Isle of Man today in the Irish Sea, and I texted him
Tell
during
him
the news
that
break just now. I texted him. I said, "What are the Isle of Man's pronouns?" Because everything's changing over there.
No,
All right,
well,
I'm trying to
it's
keep
worse
it.
here, let me tell you.
Trying to keep it light here with Mercy a little bit here at 5:39 because I am so just absolutely spitting angry at the news yesterday. That Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the last living man standing that was the mastermind of the 9/11 terror attacks, has now, after decades of legal wrangling with the federal government, he has reached a plea deal. 3 of the 5 9/11 defendants that are still at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, have reached a plea agreement with the Department of Defense and prosecutors. This was announced yesterday. Gary Sowards, the lead attorney for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, confirmed to ABC News that the agreement doesn't include the death penalty and means his client will essentially serve life in prison, which I guess will be at Gitmo. So the dream of closing Gitmo, as Obama promised back in 2008 and Biden reiterated, is never going to happen, at least not until KSM is gone. But this is so absolutely despicable, and just it sullies the memory of those incredible victims, the 3,000 victims of the 9/11 attacks. And, somebody pointed out that the leniency and the grace and legal deference given to an international terrorist that killed 3,000 American citizens is never extended. That kind of leniency, grace, understanding, or legal tolerance is never extended to people who walked into the Capitol on January 6th and waved a flag in the rotunda.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, this epitomizes the Harris-Biden administration to a T.
No, it really is shocking. You would think that, truly, he's an enemy of the state. He's someone who, and look, I am no advocate for the death penalty. Let me just start there. But he's a war criminal, quite frankly, in this case. And the mere fact is that reaching a plea deal with this guy, this terrorist, I mean, what are we thinking? Like, what's going on here? It's
also a lesson
insane.
in how to deal with it. Listen, 9/11 was an act of war, and war was waged on our country. Frankly, I think that war is still going on. We've just decided to ignore it.
Oh,
again.
it's actually gotten worse now. Think about it. ISIS is back. Think about that.
Well,
the
I know,
Taliban
but,
are back in
but
control
we've decided
in
not to continue to engage until we get hit again.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
what we've chosen to do. Fine, whatever. But the lesson here is that the way you deal with people who wage war against us is not to make sure that you capture them alive so you can make sure that they see a tribunal and a war crimes trial. No, you should handle them the way Osama bin Laden was handled. When you
take them out,
when you launch 9/11 against us, you are now a soldier on the field of war, and you will get a bullet in the head. Period. Yeah. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, we went through think about all of the people who went to such great pains to make sure that he was brought to justice, so-called, and now he will never see justice. A plea deal is not justice in my mind. This is despicable. And the Biden administration, which, finds every single legal trick in the book to imprison his political opponent, Donald Trump, can't find the wherewithal to convict Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. We've got more on this. We've got more reaction from police officers who were there the day, this whole, never forget 9/11, never forget 9/11. Joe Biden's one of those guys who loves to have a photo op with cops behind him, with firefighters behind him. They can stand there and be firefighters, and they say, we'll never forget our first responders. That's all you heard from these Democrats after September 11th. And then when it's politically convenient, well, this is exactly how they never forget. This is how they stand by their first responders. You see it firsthand. We got more, and you'll hear reaction from other people at this debacle in a moment. It's 5:43.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Never forget 9/11, we've always been told, until it's convenient to forget it for political reasons. And that's exactly what we've seen from Joe Biden and the Harris-Biden administration with this plea deal for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Mercedes, we all have a connection to 9/11. We all either knew someone or knew someone who knew someone that perished that day. By a strange happenstance, before I even started my career in the media, when I was back working in the theater business, I was friends with a man named Brad Burlingame, who ran the Hollywood Convention and Visitors Bureau. We were really good friends, Brad and I were. He's subsequently passed away. But his brother, Chick Burlingame, a Naval Academy graduate and former Navy aviator, he was the pilot of American Airlines Flight 77. He was murdered on that plane as it was hijacked, and then it was crashed into the Pentagon. I've gotten to know the Burlingames very well from my friend Brad, and then Brad and Chick's sister, Deborah Burlingame. Deborah Burlingame, you will all recognize. She became the face and voice of so many 9/11 families after that event. And 2 years ago, Catherine Herridge, when she was still with CBS News, when talks of a potential plea deal with KSM was just starting to be revealed, she asked Deborah Burlingame about the possibility that they work a plea deal out with this scum.
We didn't have remains for weeks. We were constantly saying to each other, what would Chick want? What would Chick do?
But her grief has turned to anger.
I was outraged.
After learning a potential plea deal is under discussion for the 5 9/11 defendants held at this military base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the self-described architect of 9/11.
You're in touch with other 9/11 families. Do they feel the same way? The families are outraged, and they don't want closure. They want justice.
But another group, September 11th, Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, believes a plea deal could deliver some measure of judicial finality.
Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. The families were not consulted on this. The victims were not consulted on this. By the way, we, the American people, we are the victims. Do you remember Joe Biden running on a platform that he was going to make a deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed? He never ran this by us before the election.
Yeah, but it's the military, I think, tribunal that ends up deciding what happens or doesn't happen. But I got to tell you,
but they answer to the administration.
They do.
Trust me,
They
this
do.
did not happen. He's the commander-in-chief of the military.
Yeah. Well, remember, they also, what was it? Like you mentioned, President Obama wanted to close Guantanamo Bay for quite some time. But look, these guys are talk about, we say this again, it was a war on terror. He's a war criminal. He was responsible for the killing of 3,000 Americans. You were talking about the one airplane, that got hijacked that was on its way to Washington. I mean, I was in the White House. Matt was in the White House with me. I remember being evacuated. We had to run out of the building. The complete horror and knowing what happened then about 3 or 4 miles away at the Pentagon, that the plane hit the Pentagon and innocent people were killed. I mean, this was an act of war on the United States of America, and these guys are getting a plea deal. Yeah. I mean, they get more justice in America than they get in their own countries, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? It's purely insane.
This is announced. The timing is so important here. This is announced at the exact same time Kamala Harris delivers message after message after message that Israel is the problem in the Middle East, that Hamas and Hezbollah needs to be negotiated with and dealt with diplomatically. Timing is important when things like this is announced. And this sends a message internationally to the terrorists that ultimately there will be no consequences. He's been held now for, 23 years or 22 years, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. trust me, these terrorists, they play the long game, dude. They're like, oh, you're only going to put me in jail down in Cuba for 22 years? And great. Show me the next airliner I can hijack. I'm ready to do my job for Allah. That's the message that's being sent here. No consequences when all is said and done. Bernard Kerik, who was, of course, commissioner of the New York Police Department on 9/11, put out a statement on this as well. He's absolutely outraged. He says it's nothing but a big wet kiss to all the crazy Hamas supporters. Commit acts of terror and kill Americans, and you can get away with it. Rob O'Donnell, again, for his fellow brothers and sisters in the New York Police Department, who were told we were all supposed to remember 9/11 on behalf of, he is outraged. He'll be joining us at 7:15. The fact that this happens in the final lame duck months of Biden's presidency in the middle of a campaign because they know they're just trying to clean this mess up before the new president can take over, it reeks of everything that's wrong with Washington, D.C., Mercedes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it shows this leniency towards these terrorists. And I think that when you have seen that in Afghanistan, the Taliban is back in power, you're seeing the fact that ISIS continues to grow. You see Hamas, Hezbollah, they still feel empowered. That's right. They're in charge. They're in charge.
Yeah, every single thing, when you're dealing with a terrorist at a time when terrorists are killing innocent people post-October 7th, this most recent horrific attack, every single thing you do with a terrorist, you should say, okay, what message does this send? How will the terrorists interpret this? How will they use this for their own propaganda purposes? Think about this. Think about how this is now going to be used as another weapon against us. And by the way, it's not like we've forgotten who Joe Biden is just because he stepped off the ticket. He is a menace. He is a liar. He has been a political manipulator his entire corrupt career. I want you to go back now to September 11th when he was president in 2022. This is the 21st anniversary of the attacks. Listen to him then. Cut 11.
I know for all those of you who've lost someone, 21 years is both a lifetime and no time at all. It's good to remember. These memories help us heal, but they can also open up the hurt and take us back to that moment when the grief was so raw.
That was President Joe Biden marking the 21st anniversary.
He's so sincere. He's the sympathizer in chief. Bull.
And we're a little over, think about it, we're a little over a month into 9/11. What is he going to tell the families then? What is he going to say? What's the message?
He won't even show up. Oh, no, he'll send Kamala out there. It'll become a campaign appearance for Kamala. He won't even show up. He doesn't do anything.
But, Biden is a ceremonial president. That's what he is. I feel like we're living in Latin America or something like that.
Absolute outrage. Rob O'Donnell coming up at 7:15 to talk about this. It's 5:54. All right, coming up, we promised you at the beginning of this week that we are going to continue to hyper-focus on the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. It's the biggest story of the year, and of course the mainstream media seems to have ignored it. Well, a new video has now been uncovered that shows, plain as day, that the would-be assassin, the man who nearly took Donald Trump's life before our eyes, was in full, plain sight of Secret Service on the roof